Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories like these. Now, let's get into today's story video. 6 months later, divorcing my husband was a huge mistake. This one is lengthy, but it is well worth reading. If I could offer anybody divorce advice, it would be to avoid it under normal conditions. If your partner is hitting you or threatening you or your children, you must leave immediately. There was no abuse in my situation. We were together for 8 years, which was largely pleasant, and we had 4 children. Around 5 years ago, I received a promotion at work, and I began to suspect that my ex was pulling me down, or at the very least holding me back from greater success and a better life. We never had much money, but thanks to my promotion, I was suddenly earning more than he was. I began working longer hours, while his hours were reduced, allowing him to spend more time at home. I started to dislike him since he was home and got to spend time with our kids. When I arrived home most evenings, kids were already getting ready for bed, if not asleep. After a few months at my new work, I realized that things were not going well at home without me. When I arrived home some evenings, the dishes weren't done, the kids hadn't eaten, or anything else I could think of to be upset about. It didn't really matter. He kept insisting that he would do better, but that being at home all the time was difficult. That used to irritate me a lot. Things only got worse over the following several years. My hours weren't much lower, and his were full-time on and off. Because of my hours, there was no suitable time for him to work full-time, but we also needed the money. Whenever he said he could get more hours, I constantly grumbled, and the fewer hours he worked, the more I moaned that he wasn't making enough money. Whenever he brought up the inconsistency, he was met with silence. I'd tell him he had to sort things out on his own. I knew that would irritate him, so I began repeating it often and for anything I could think of. I began to dislike him and distanced myself from him. I was aware that it was causing him pain, but I didn't care. If he didn't want to harm me, he'd make an effort to make me happy. I used the same justification when I began talking to another man at work. I believed he was just a buddy, but chatting at work developed into texting at home, which turned into photographs and videos, and then I tried to steal some alone time with him. I knew it was wrong, but it made me feel alive in a way that my spouse hadn't made me feel in years. I was sick of being sad, so I did something for myself. The worst was the night I arrived home at a respectable hour to find him cleaning the whole house, cooking the entire family supper, and selecting a movie for all of us to watch together. This would have made me swoon a few years ago, but I couldn't even look at him, and claimed to be unwell that night. I stayed in bed for the remainder of the night while he waited on me, checked on me, and even cooked me new meals and brought it to me in bed. It made me feel bad, which made me upset that he made me feel that way, and by the end of the night, I was messaging with the other man. It didn't matter what he did for the following month or two after that night. Most days, he was wrong simply for breathing. He would get enraged at how I was treating him, and I would just wait and encourage him to lose it because I knew it would happen eventually. After most of our disagreements, he would apologize for whatever I told him he did wrong, if there was anything to apologize for, but I never did. Usually, I'd find a way to make him feel even worse. I knew I was right because he was incorrect, and that was all that mattered to me. When he found out about my connection with the man from work, I pretended I didn't care. It broke my heart to watch him fighting back tears, but I wasn't going to let him see that. When he was at his weakest, I decided to tell him I wanted a divorce. I could practically hear his heart pounding inside his chest. He argued and insisted that we could work through it together. I wasn't interested in repairing our marriage, but I largely stopped things with the other person because I knew I could get it back if I wanted to. I could see he was trying, and I would sometimes tell him so. But for the most part, I continued to be a jerk to him for any and all reasons I could think of. I'm not sure what more the God could have done to make me happy aside find a job that paid enough for me to not have to work at all. He stated he was searching, but seeking and finding are not the same thing. This group and a few others were introduced to me around this period. I began writing things about him from my point of view solely, and I received so much favorable reaction for how I felt that I knew I was correct. The more I posted, the more affirmation I received. It wasn't only me who realized XH wasn't worth maintaining. I have the whole internet telling me how bad he is. I began screaming horrible things to him and even ignoring him. I was so certain of my and everyone else's opinions that I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce within a few weeks. I continued to utilize this site and a few others to confirm my sentiments and get support to go forward with it, and it was eventually completed. It went fairly well. XH didn't ask for much, other than not to be divorced and to attempt to work things out. That didn't bother me at all. He was shattered, but I was free. I could do anything I wanted without feeling guilty or having to answer to anybody. It was an incredible sensation of liberation, but it didn't last long. I missed trash day 3 times in the first month after he moved out. There was seldom a clean dish, and the clothes remained in mounds for so long that I had to start sniffing it to determine whether it could be worn again. I've also never seen my children so unhappy. My oldest had seen some of the other guys' texts months before, and she understood that XH still wanted to try to work things out. She didn't take long to stop talking to me, except to mention she wanted to go to XH place. Everyone others said they wanted to live with XH as well. I tried my hardest to make them happy, but all I ended up doing was buying them toys all the time, and their enjoyment only lasted a few minutes. I was also experiencing a lot of difficulties at work. I couldn't work all the additional hours I was supposed to since I was alone. I eventually caved and began phoning XH to babysit the kids. He would always come over as soon as he could and ask if I needed anything. When I got home, I'd find clean dishes, clothes, and sometimes even meals. After I arrived home, he would never say too much. He'd just tell me to contact him if I needed anything and then depart. He took out the trash and delivered it to the curb one night since it was garbage time and I had forgotten once again. When it came time for him to go, he always looked melancholy. After a few months, my buddies persuaded me to go on a date. It was for dinner and a movie, and I was delighted and optimistic, but throughout dinner, I began to experience an overpowering sense of guilt. It became so awful that I didn't even go to the movies. A week and a million tears later, I was sitting on a therapist's couch. I informed her about everything that had transpired, beginning with the promotion I had received at work. She did not agree with me or any of the divorce advice I received. I ended myself in her office twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, and the more I tried to support my point, the more I realized how wrong I was. It was really upsetting. I don't think I've ever sobbed so much in my life as I did in her office during the first month. After roughly $2,000 in therapy sessions, I discovered that my XH had flaws, but mine were much worse. I did so many horrible things and said so many horrible things that I wouldn't want to be with him, but he did. I recalled him urging me at the meeting with the lawyer to please not forward with it. I did, however, go through with it, and subsequently boasted on here about how fantastic it felt. I was completely incorrect, and now I realize why. I walked outside with him a few weeks ago as he was leaving the home. I inquired about resuming our relationship. When he glanced at me, his eyes were filled with tears and a few streamed down his cheeks. He said he didn't know whether he could. He explained that the suffering had been too intense for too long, and that if we got back together, I may simply do it to him again. He said he always imagined I'd understand how much he loved me and stop talking about it until I signed the divorce papers and gave out a great exaggerated sigh of relief. That upset him the most, he added, and he doesn't know if he can ever trust me again. I can't say I blame him. I annihilated a guy who, in retrospect, was a wonderful spouse. I deprived my children of having a wonderful father in the home with them, and I take his children away from him. And I, the one who pushed for the divorce anticipating happiness and a free life, spend all of my leisure time at home or on a therapist's couch. Please do not just follow the advice of anybody on this or any other website when it comes to seeking a divorce. If your marriage is failing, first examine yourself to determine if you can make adjustments. This is both men's and women's guidance. Divorce is not a pleasant experience. Divorce is not a pleasant experience, and watching your spouse devastated and your children unhappy as a result of your acts is the most agonizing sensation I can imagine. I wish you all the best and hope that you will give your marriages another opportunity.